Okay, all right. Let's see how we are doing here. It looks like we are indeed live. Let me know if you can hear me, if you can see me, if you are pre-enjoying the stream. So, got a lot in store for us tonight. It's going to be a lot of fun. You will notice that Joanna is not here yet, but she will be. So, she's going to come in. I'm going to do a lot of the breeding stuff and talk about that because that's not really as much her thing. And so she's down in the fish room doing all her fish room things. Little top secret, yesterday was her birthday. And so she didn't get to do, or actually didn't do a lot of the things that she would normally do on a Tuesday because she wanted to celebrate the day. And I certainly encouraged that. So now she's down there doing a few things in the fish room and she'll be up later, like I said. So she will be up after we talk a little bit about how to breed fish. I hope you have a fun time tonight. Thank you so much for being here. As always, it's one of our favorite times of the week when we get to hang out with you guys, hang out with a bunch of people who love fish. Thank you again for being here. Thank you. I already saw some people joining up as members. I appreciate that, Wes. And then I see Finis08 and Wes, thank you for the super chat. Appreciate that already. As you know, we didn't even start the live stream yet, so I appreciate that. A couple of announcements before we get into everything. One, Joanna did a really cool video today. If you haven't had a chance to see it, it's not fish related. It is butterfly related. Yes, butterflies. We had the opportunity last summer to go to the Butterfly Palace in Branson, Missouri, and I had never been to a butterfly place before. I think butterflies are cool, but I've never kept them as a pet or anything like that. But it was a really cool place. Definitely worth checking out that video. A little 5 minutes of just cool butterflies if you want to see that. This week, this past Monday, we did a video. Oh my gosh, what did we do? What was our video about? Well, it was a cool video. I'm blanking out already because, it's been 2 days and it's been a long week. So Monday, and then this Friday, we've got a video coming out on Primetime Aquatics. I haven't decided yet if I'm doing a science series, a species profile, some type of review. I have no idea what I want to do. I've got videos that I want to shoot between now and then. I just don't know exactly what I'm going to be doing for Friday, but I'll try to make it awesome. And then Saturday, Joanna's got her video coming out on the small scape, where every Saturday she tries to give a really cool little tip on how to either save money in the hobby or make things easier in the hobby, which I think is pretty cool. I learned quite a bit from what she does because I don't always know what she's doing on Saturdays. So all of a sudden I see this video. I'm like, oh, that's actually a pretty cool idea. So that's kind of what's going on in this week in Primetime Aquatics. So tonight, I thought it would be cool just to talk about some breeding tips for those of you who have maybe thought about breeding but haven't done it yet, or you've done it before and you want maybe a different perspective on breeding. We have bred in the fish room. I don't know how many thousands and thousands of fish we've bred over the years in lots of species. I don't really keep track of them. I was at one point doing this BAP program through one of our cichlid clubs, breeder awards points thing, and they would award plaques for how many species that you breed. And the problem is I just get too busy and I don't always bring them in to get the award points and all that stuff. But breeding can be a lot of fun. It can help make you money. And if you want more information on breeding, I've got a bunch of videos in the description about breeding for profit, breeding for loss, which nobody ever talks about. At least I don't hear a lot of people talking about, oh, that might be a bad idea. Something we'll touch on tonight as we talk about this. And I've also done a video just specifically on how to keep fish fry alive and how to maximize fry. So all that stuff is in the description below if you want to learn a little bit more. That will be there for you. So figured let's go ahead, just get right on into the subject matter because that's why you're here. Okay, so breeding tips, so things to think about. I would say this: if you have never bred fish before, or even if you're new to fish keeping, you're like, you know what, breeding fish sounds like a pretty cool idea. One of the things I would consider is trying to breed fish that are relatively easy to breed. And that might mean guppies or endlers, some type of live bear, platies, mollies. Even mollies can be a little bit more challenging only because they could be a little bit more aggressive than some of the other fish I've talked about so far. But try something easy. Bristlenose plecos can be relatively straightforward. If you've got the water parameters, Neocaridina shrimp can be fun to watch breed. So those are some options where you can breed some really cool fish that don't cost a lot of money, that aren't going to be really hard to manage, and just kind of get into this whole idea of, okay, I've got these fish that I'm breeding, I've got fry that I have to care for, and that might be a little bit easier than some other types of fish. Now, the other piece of advice I would give from the start is be careful what you breed. There are fish out there that are easy to breed, but you might not be able to get rid of the fish once you breed them. And it's something that you have to consider. Breeding can be a lot of fun, and it's really cool raising fry. But at some point, whether it's guppies or cichlids, South Central American cichlids, African cichlids, tetras, at some point you start to run into this issue like, wow, you know what? I've got a lot of fish in these tanks, and now I need to figure out what I'm going to do with them. That's an easier thing to deal with if you are breeding fish that other people may want. Something we talk about in the Breeding for Profit series. But if you're breeding things, I'll just throw out, at least in our area, and all this stuff I recognize can be kind of regional, but in our area, yeah, I just saw cough, cough, convicts. Yes, Muriel, that's exactly where I was going. Convicts are awesome, and a full-grown convict is something to behold. And I don't know if a lot of people have actually seen full-grown convicts, but they are amazing-looking fish. They get the nice long trailers, and some of them, they get this nice little orange part of their belly with the gray and the black stripes, and they really do look amazing. The problem is once they get going and they start to really breed, they produce a lot of fry. And it's often really difficult to get rid of those fry. I would say the same thing is true for things like we had our Midas cichlids breed. I kind of documented that when we did the Midas cichlid species profile. And there were hundreds upon hundreds of fry. That's awesome, and those fish were beautiful, but how many people have room for a 13 or 14 inch, relatively aggressive New World cichlid that can be a little bit difficult to house, and you've got to mess with the tank mates, and now I've got 600 to 800 of them, right? What am I going to do with all these fish? Oscars would be very similar to that as well. So you want to start out simple, but you also want to make sure that the fish you're breeding, if you choose to move them out of your fish tanks, there's people that will be interested in. Like, so for guppies and platies and endlers, there's always going to be people interested in those fish because they're cool looking. They're nice community fish. You don't need a big tank to house them. But when you start breeding large South and Central American cichlids that have hundreds upon hundreds of fry, the customer base, the people willing to buy those fish, is probably going to be smaller than the smaller, the guppies and endlers and things. So just something to think about. The other thing to consider, water parameters. Now here's where things get, okay, if you've been watching the channel for any length of time, and if you've been listening to the live streams, I've been a pretty big proponent of keep your water parameters stable, and having stable water parameters is more important than reaching some ideal water parameter. And that is true. Where that can change a little bit is when you are beginning the breeding process. A lot of fish will live happily, healthy, and a very long life in water parameters that are not identical to where they would be found in nature, because a lot of these fish never saw nature. They've only seen tank water. They've only seen a tank raised atmosphere. And so they adapt pretty well to various water parameters as long as they're stable. But when it comes to breeding, that may not always hold true. And so I'll give you some examples. So for instance, we have found a pistogramma. We've bred a pistogramma in our water that's right around a pH of 8, but the fry survival is relatively low. Same thing with our Bolivian rams. Why? Because in nature, those fish are found in a lower pH with softer water. And while the adults are fine, when it comes to breeding and actually getting the fry to survive, at least for us, that's been a little bit more challenging. Another example would be for people who really like the shell dwellers, like the Maltese or the Simless, or any type of Rift Lake cichlid, African cichlid. It's like, okay, well, yeah, they're going to probably do fairly well and survive in water that's in the low 7s, 7.2, 7.3, 7.4. They might even breed, but it might be less than ideal, and you might have less fry survival than if you have that pH of 8.0 to 8.4 like we do. So the other thing to consider then is another tip, if you will. When you choose to breed fish, often, especially if you're newer, it's easier to choose fish that are best suited for the water parameters that you already have. That way, you're not trying to track or get to an ideal water parameter for the breeding, because that can reduce the stability of your water parameters, and that can not only damage fry, but then your adult fish might experience problems as well. So think about your water parameters. If you've got harder water with a higher pH, well, that's great. You can do the live bears, a lot of them. You can do the African cichlids and not have to really mess with too much. If you've got softer water and maybe a lower pH, it's like, well, maybe those fish I just mentioned might not be the best, but that opens up a whole different realm for you. And so maybe you're doing some of the South and Central American dwarf cichlids or some of the tetras, and it's like, wow, these things are really taking off in that slightly softer, more acidic water. So use that as your guide. You're going to have a lot more fun if you're not chasing ideal water parameters for fish breeding. I mean, you can go really extreme. So for instance, some of the South American cichlids that I've seen, some of the more rare apistos, it's like you talk to the experts who have bred these things, like, no, I had to get the water down to like a pH of 5.5 in order to get them to spawn. I had to do some water changes and do all these things. And it's like, that's cool if you want a challenge, but it might not be the best if you're someone who just wants to see some baby fish swimming around the tank, and now you've got to try to figure out all these water parameter issues. And so the other thing to consider too is, of course, you got to have a well-cycled tank, but it sounds simple. No ammonia, no nitrite. Ideally, nitrates less than 20 parts per million or less. That's going to keep your adult fish really happy, to allow them to spawn and then keep the fish fry in good shape. But the other thing to consider is, depending on how you're breeding your fish, you may need to move the fry out of that tank and into a grow-out tank at some point. Okay. Well, is your grow-out tank fully cycled? Does it have zero ammonia? Does it have zero nitrite? Does it have a reasonable nitrate level? And does it also have the same water parameters as where the original tank, compared to the original tank? So you just need to make sure that that is indeed the case. Now, a lot of people don't necessarily think about this. Water temperature can play a role in whether or not your fish breed. Now, depending on the fish. So for instance, cory cats. For some species of cory cats, you'll notice that they tend to breed after a water change. It could be a slight change in temperature. It could be a slight change in water hardness, and that is a cue for them to start breeding. I have noticed that some of our peacock cichlids, and it's like, for some of you who have bred cichlids, you probably recognize this right away, where it's like, wow, you know what? I got my 75-gallon Mbuna tank, and I did a 75% water change, and the next thing I know, I've got 2 pairs of cichlids on both sides of the aquarium, and they're breeding. And now I've got females holding eggs everywhere. Same thing can happen for peacock cichlids and Lake Tanganyika fish. And so there's something about that water change, where it be a slight change in temperature, or even maybe lowering the water temporarily, and then that water comes back in. That might simulate something like in nature, like a rainstorm. And so that may trigger fish to breed as well. And that's more species dependent. That's not every single fish. Like, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and 50% water change all my tanks and just watch the breeding happen. That doesn't happen all the time, but for certain species, when you do your research, you might find out, wow, that's a really important component of breeding the particular type of fish that you want to breed. The other thing to keep in mind is, how are you setting up your tank? If you're just starting to breed, or you have a fish that you really love and you're like, this is my goal. Desperately, I want these fish to breed. I would highly consider and recommend make that tank a species-only tank. And so we've got those all around our fishermen. And you know, it's funny, because when I first started keeping fish, I thought maybe the species-only tank would be boring. It's like, I don't want just one fish in my tank. I want a bunch of different kinds of fish. That's what's going to make it so cool. And that can be true. But again, we're talking about breeding here, right? We're talking about the idea of getting fish to have more fish. When you're doing that, sometimes it's easiest to have a species-only tank. So for instance, when you look around the fish room, of course, one of the more popular tanks is the multi 50-gallon lowboy. Those are just multis. I have them in a 40 breeder. I've got Neolamprologus similis all by themselves in a 20 long, the Cyprichromis tank. So I've got a number of fish, especially when I first get them. It's like, all right, I'm going to put these fish in their own tank with no other difference, with no other species, no other types of fish. Maybe sometimes bristlenose plecos are in there if I know they're not going to eat eggs because maybe I got mouth brooders or something like that. So try that. Try a species-only tank. You might have more success, because the thing to consider, if your fish are breeding in a community tank, it almost doesn't matter what type of fish it is. I have found, at least for me personally, when they breed in a community tank, the fry very rarely survive. They usually get eaten by other fish. And that can go for, wow, I've got some fairly aggressive cichlids in my tank, but I've also got maybe some dither fish in that tank. So as an example, I don't know, maybe they're Jack Dempseys, let's say. And you've got your Jack Dempseys, and they're pretty stinking protective. Like when they're breeding, they're definitely gonna try to protect their fry. But what if you also have some larger rainbow fish in that tank, or you've got some silver dollars in there? Guess what's gonna happen? Those other fish are quick. You've only got the two parents guarding all those fry, and if you've got hundreds of fry, the other fish will slowly start picking them off. And so often what I do is, if I know my fish are breeding, this is a little bit easier when it comes to things like peacock cichlids and Mbuna cichlids, mouth brooding cichlids where they've got a mouthful of eggs, a mouthful of fry. I've done videos on how to recognize when fish are holding eggs. When I notice that, I usually pull that female out of that tank and put her in her own 10-gallon. And yes, you can put a peacock cichlid in a 10 or a 20. You can put certainly an Mbuna cichlid that's holding in a 10-gallon tank, no problem. What that does is it relaxes that female, because now she's not worried, because these females, I mentioned this before, they can't protect themselves easily when they've got a mouthful of eggs. So if somebody is chasing her or attacking her, usually they just try to hide. And if they can't do that, they stress out, and that's going to reduce your fry survival, because sometimes they'll spit the eggs, sometimes they'll spit the fry too early, and then guess what happens? All the other fish in the tank are like, wow, where did all this fish food come from? And it's live, and they polish off all the fry, usually fairly quickly. And so if you've got fish that are holding eggs, it's best just to pull them, put them in their own tank, and then what I do is I let them spit those fry out when they're ready, because they know when they're ready. They spit them out, and then I leave the female in there for a while. And I leave the female in there and I feed the fry, and I feed her, let her regain some weight, let her just relax, because she was just holding fry for maybe 3-4 weeks, depending on the temperature of the water and the species of fish. I don't want to, a lot of people will strip the female and tumble the eggs and throw them right back in the tank. You can do that as long as you've stripped those eggs quickly, but then understand too, you run the risk of burning out your females where they're just breeding and breeding and breeding and breeding. And pretty soon they're not eating a lot, and they're expending a lot of nutrients constantly making those eggs. So it's just something to think about. Sometimes it's easiest, if you can, just to remove the female if they're holding. Now, if they're not, let's say you have a pair and you've got biparental care, and they didn't, they lay their eggs on a surface, and then you see fry in the tank, you're left with a couple of options. If it's just the pair, you can leave them. Usually, some new fish or some fish when they're new parents are like, yeah, we just had a bunch of fish food too. This is great. We were protecting those eggs. It's crazy, but it's like they're protecting these eggs for, a few days, and all of a sudden the fry hatch, and they're like, huh, turns out we just protected a bunch of fish food, and then they go and eat them, right? That happens. So if that happens where you've got certain types of cichlids, especially, I've seen that happen with the pistos. Our sahicas did that a couple times. Electric blue acara did that to us. So some of those, the South and Central American cichlids sometimes are like, well, I'm not really used to being a maw or a paw, and I'm just going to go ahead and eat those things. Our severums have done that before. So it does happen. So your options are, okay, do I have a tank set up where I can remove some of the fry, most of the fry, and put them in a grow-out tank? You can remove the eggs before they ever even hatch. So as soon as they lay the eggs and they're fertilized, they've done the thing, and now they're protecting. If they laid it on a rock or a piece of wood, you remove that thing, put it in a tank with an air stone, make sure the water parameters are good. Some people will put in, and I'm not going to explain the process here, but either methylene blue or even hydrogen peroxide to reduce the likelihood that they fungus. You could potentially try to scrape the eggs off and tumble them as well, and then put the egg tumbler right in the tank in which they were spawned. So those are all options, but again, it really is species dependent. Now, The other thing to consider too when you're talking about the fish in the tank when it comes to breeding are male to female ratios. Now this can be different depending on the type of fish that you're trying to breed. A lot of times, especially for cichlids, African cichlids, we're told, okay, get your male and 3 or 4 females, and that should be a good ratio where your male's got plenty of females to breed with. They're going to be holding the eggs and then releasing the fry later on. Ideally not in that same tank because, again, the other fish will most likely eat them. But that one male that has multiple females to mate with, and the females hopefully aren't getting as worn down. So that's one option. Sometimes it's a pair, right? So that's not going to work long term if you've got South and Central American cichlids, because a lot of times they just like to pair up, sometimes temporarily, sometimes for longer periods of time, depending on the species. But if you have a male and 3 or 4 females, that might be good if you want to figure out, okay, how are my pair bonds going to work? Or even if you've got multiple males and multiple females, it's like, all right, who's pairing up? But then you've got to look at the size of the tank. It's like, okay, if I've got 2 apisto pairs that are breeding in the same tank, ideally I'd like to have at least a 4-foot tank to give them the space so they're not going to be picking each other's fry off or chasing each other around. If I had a couple of apisto pairs and like, let's say a standard 20 gallon, then I'm like, all right, this might not be good. So maybe I'll remove 1 pair and put them in their own tank and keep 1 pair in the original. And then that might make things a little bit easier. So again, it really just depends. You have to do the research. Depending on the species that you're keeping, what is the male to female ratio going to be? The other thing to consider, of course, is what are you feeding your fish? So the things that I like best, if I have smaller fish, even if they're adults, and so my shell dwellers, my cyprichromis, just about any type of live bearer that I can think of, most community fish under, let's say, 3 inches. If you put live baby brine in the tank, most likely they're going to go nuts about it. They're going to be like, this is awesome. And they will eat that stuff. And what I have found, especially for the smaller fish, live baby brine is often really a nice trigger for them to start breeding. It's very nutrient rich. It's also great because you can feed it to the fry. Obviously, that's the main point. So live baby brine works. If you don't have that, live blackworms, bloodworms, live or frozen. Sometimes brine shrimp, especially live adult brine shrimp will work. That is not as easy to hatch out on your own because you've got to set up the proper water parameters, but you can certainly go to a store and buy that, and that can be a very nutrient. There's nutrients there that will allow fish to breed a little bit more easily. So, if you breed cories, let's say, one of the ways that you get them to really spawn is you give them a lot of blackworms or bloodworms. I have found that, especially for those of you who like to breed bristlenose plecos, bloodworms work wonders. If you give them bloodworms a few days in a row, they're like, oh, the females get these nice round bellies and they get all full of eggs. The next thing you know, you've got males all stuck in caves protecting eggs and making sure the little fry, the pleco fry, stay in the tank. So those are great foods to feed your fish, provided that your fish can handle that. So I would not recommend, oh, he said bloodworms are a great idea, so I'm going to go ahead and feed my Mbuna cichlids a lot of bloodworms, and then you bloat them all out and they die. So again, it's got to be specific to the fish that you're feeding. I have never found, I'm trying to think if I've ever found a fish where live baby brine was a problem for them. I personally haven't. I've heard people who have bred some fish and they said the live baby brine might have been an issue weeks down the road, but they were very rare fish from what I can remember, and it wasn't anything like, oh yeah, I got to watch that now. So food is definitely a consideration if you're doing prepared foods. As some of you know, we are sponsored by Flip Aquatics, which supplies us with our food, which is Northfin, and I absolutely love the food. I mean, it's a high quality food. There are a few foods out there like top of the echelon type of foods. Northfin has got, we feed the kelp flakes and the cichlid mix and the community flakes, and then they've got the pellets, micro pellets, all the way up to jumbo food sticks. And our fish really like that, and that is, I think that's one of the reasons why we get so much breeding in a lot of our tanks. So that's also something to think about. Now, let's say you get the fry. A lot of people, and this is what I see a lot of times in like Facebook groups, or I get comments in some of my videos and some of the species profiles especially, where it's like, I just got a bunch of fry here. Now I'm trying to figure out what to do with them because I'd really prefer to keep them alive. And once again, I will tell you that live baby brine is an absolute go-to for us. We hatch it out in the morning and at night every single day, 7 days a week. And I am convinced that is why so many of our shell dweller fry, they breed so readily, and we get so many of them. Same with our cyprichromas, all of our live bears. I mean, if you just watch the way these fish attack that food, it's really, in my opinion, probably one of the best, if not the best food you can feed fry, provided that they're large enough to eat it. Some of them might need things like microworms or really finely crushed fry food if they're smaller than your typical, guppy fry, let's say, something like that. Now, food's important. Water parameters, as I've already mentioned, are really important that they remain stable. Once you've got the fry, even having, it doesn't have to be necessarily ideal like it was for the breeding process and the egg hatching process, but you don't want to switch those water parameters very rapidly either. So if you have a tank where you've got, let's say, a pistogramma, and they were a little bit finicky for you, so you decided, okay, I'm going to make the pH in this tank a 6.5, and the water hardness is right around, 3 or 4 degrees general and carbonate hardness. And that was stable. You did that. It was stable. And you get the eggs to hatch, and you get the fry to hatch. The last thing you'd want to do is be like, okay, I've got to grow these fry out. Let me go ahead and chuck them in my normal tap water that's a pH of 8, and it's got a general and carbonate hardness of 10 or 12. That might cause some problems. And so it's just, again, that's why I recommend, if you're going to breed fish that naturally conform to your water parameters so you don't have to mess with that stuff. A lot of people don't mind changing the water parameters for a special fish to breed, but then they have to think about what happens when I've got to grow these fish out and they don't all fit in the same breeding tank. And now I've got to maintain 2, 3, 4, 5 tanks with similar water parameters and maybe change them slowly over time. That gets a little bit cumbersome. So it's, and that gets to also the other thing you have to think about is when you're breeding, where are you going to move all these fish to? Because if you've got, I'll take Mbuna cichlids or peacock cichlids as an example, or even bristlenose plecos. It's very common for them to have 25 to 40 fry. Okay, well, what if your tank was already, you had an overstocked Mbuna or a male peacock cichlid tank, or I guess in this case it'd be mixed, but it's basically at capacity. Well, what are you going to do now that you've got 30 extra fish? Okay, they were really awesome. Like what we do is we can grow them out in a 10-gallon tank, but then when they get to about the size of 3/4 of an inch to an inch, they need to move. Otherwise, they're going to get their growth stunted. And so now you got to figure out, okay, I got to get them in a larger tank and grow those out. Well, if you do that with 3 or 4 different species, all of a sudden you can see where proper planning is really important. It's one of the reasons why we've got 12, currently we have 12 10-gallon tanks set up in the basement. Part of that is for grow out. And then we have, a simple solution is plastic totes. We get the 30-gallon plastic totes that cost like $7 or $8 a piece. And they're fine. And they're really good for grow out, and it gives them a little bit of extra space. And they're easy to break down and restart. So it's just some things you have to think about before you get into breeding. So that's some tips for you. I'm going to go through here, and I saw some super chats rolling. I don't want to ignore those for sure. We'll answer questions. By the way, as Myrtle always says in our wonderful moderators, and I remind you, if you've got a question for me, if you can put the @Primetime Aquatics, that on my screen, it illuminates it orange, and then I know, okay, this is a question I need to key in on. Multi-tank addiction. Appreciate the weekly fecal matter sticker chat thing. Awesome. Let's see here. We've got scrolling on down, and Joanna should be here fairly soon, I think. Tyler, thank you so much for the super chat. I appreciate it. 17.1 gallon tank. Neocaridina blue shrimp, red racer nearite snail, Paddock nearite. Okay, so a couple nearites, lightning bolt. So we got a bunch of nearites, some rabbit snails, black devil snail. That I've never heard of. I don't know what that is. White wizards. I'm wondering, are those maybe just types of mystery snails? 6 otos, 2 azo 9 sponge filters. Thoughts and ideas. 17 gallon. I don't know if that's just like a marketing name for the black devil snail, the white wizard snail. And to me, that seems like, and I have no idea what that is. I'm assuming those are mystery snails, maybe not. Stocking wise, I think you're fine. You've got an entire tank full of cleanup crew, so that's not going to be an issue. If those are mystery snails, they're going to produce a decent amount of waste, but nothing crazy. You don't have that many of them. You'll have to keep an eye on the snails and their breeding. The nearite snails won't breed in fresh water, so that's not going to be a problem. Probably your main breeding in that tank is going, I'm assuming, is really about the blue dream shrimp or the Neocaridina blue shrimp. So that's going to be cool. The nice thing about having the snails in there with your shrimp is if the shrimp don't get to some of that food, the snails will. And so that's a nice thing. The thing that I found when doing a shrimp and snail only tank is you just have to really be careful with the feeding and making sure, and I don't know if this tank is planted. I'm assuming there's probably some plants in there. And the reason why I say that is if you've got a lot of rooted plants, you also still kind of have to keep an eye on the detritus that's in the fish waste and uneaten food that sinks into the substrate if you're not using sand. Because what can happen is you start getting a lot of detritus worms, and then eventually planaria shows up and wipes out a shrimp colony. So just keep that in mind. If you've got sand, less of a problem for sure. If you are really on your feeding game, you're in good shape. So yeah, that's a pretty cool mix. Very nice. Thank you once again. Uh-oh, somebody just walked in this room. Ta-da! Were you cleaning tanks, feeding fish? What were you doing?
Yep.
We all want to know.
Yes and yes.
All right.
I was whooping it up.
Cool. You have anything you want to add about breeding fish in all of your extensive years of breeding fish?
No, I only had the Heteranura famosa breed for me so far. So
and the shrimp, right?
Yeah,
your
shrimp.
Pumpkin shrimp and your Fleur-de-Lis killie. You actually did a really good job with the Fleur-de-Lis killifish. That's a live bear, for those of you who don't know. They're like this big, so they max out maybe an inch, 3/4 of an inch most likely. Male stay even smaller. Mm-hmm. And you bred the heck out of those things, which is pretty cool.
Little cuties. Yeah.
David, thank you. Appreciate the super chat. The 65-gallon tall. Yep, it's the same as a 40 breeder, only taller. 36 by 18 by 23 compared to a regular 55. Would it be a downgrade in space even though it's larger? I need it for my cichlid blood parrot. Severum, angelfish, silver dollars, 2 small plecos. Any thoughts? Yeah, if you haven't bought it yet, I don't know if I would. So yes, you're right. You're getting 10 additional gallons, but the problem is it's wider, and that's normally good. And so if this were a tank where your fish were smaller, then maybe you could make an argument that some, like, maybe I'm talking about like, oh, I've got some epistles, I've got some rams, and they're going to breed at the bottom, and I've got some, I don't know, some small tetras, or like, I don't know, emperor tetras or Von Rio tetras in the center, and I've got some fish towards the top, maybe some small rainbows, dwarf rainbow fish. Then I might, I don't know if you're going to get enough for your money with that change. If it were me, and I were looking, if I had a 55 and I were looking to change things up, because you do have some fish in there, the blood parrot, when those, and the Severum, when they get big, they're large, right? That's a decent sized fish. So you're right in thinking that in the angelfish, silver dollars, those are all fish that are definitely going to outgrow, that community is going to outgrow that 55. So you're right to be thinking about it. However, I might be looking at a 75 gallon for that combination when I'm ready to upgrade. And quite frankly, I think if you do your homework right and you shop around, the 75, you've already got the 4-foot space dedicated, right? With the 55. So if that's indeed what you've got, so why not just go to the 75? You're still got the 4 feet in length. You've also got the width of that 65 that you're looking at, and almost the same height. The 75 is really close to 23. It might be 21, but that's the way I would go if I were looking to change out of that 55. And I think like I said, I think you're on the right track, knowing, okay, these fish are going to get bigger. I'm going to need something a little bit more. Even with that tank, again, you're looking at a 4-foot tank. Normally, I don't recommend this tank for most of the time, but the 90 gallon. And I say that only because you've got that Severum and the angelfish in there, and they're a little bit taller, and that might look a little nicer. They're a little bit harder to work on. So that 90 gallon is the same as a 75. So 4 feet long, 18.5 inches wide. And the height on those things, I don't remember exactly what they are, but they're probably 25 inches tall or so. But that might also be a nice tank to look at. So yeah, but appreciate the super chat. All right, what do you got? You got anything? Did you see anything that interested you?
No, I see a lot of happy birthday wishes. That's really sweet. I've been literally celebrating since Saturday.
Yeah,
because
you got a birthday week going on here, huh?
because Saturday I have a twin sister, and I got to see her. She lives in Wisconsin, so I got to see her on Saturday. So I was really like thinking we really treated Saturday as our birthday. So I've been celebrating nonstop.
Yeah. It's nonstop celebrations, big parties. Yeah. Okay, you know what I just noticed?
What?
And I don't know if this just happened when you walked in, but I look more pink now than I did before. Like, I think you threw off the color balance of the camera again.
I throw a lot of things off.
Yeah, you certainly did. Captain Spicy, any info on Otos? I just said that out loud without missing a beat.
That's
it's almost,
cool.
Yeah. Any info on otocinkless fry? I'm starting to think they're not algae eaters. Tank is covered in algae. The best looking ones have brown scat and graze the underside plant leaves. If you're getting fry, first of all, congratulations. That's cool. They are scavengers, so it's not like, all that stuff I said about brine shrimp and all that stuff doesn't really apply to them. If you're looking to maximize their survival rates, so for instance, this is something I didn't really mention when I got to the food part, and I probably should have. I neglected this. I really like rapashi foods. So for any of your bottom feeding fish that you're trying to breed, that could be cory cats. That could certainly be, in this case, the otocinkless, bristlenose, plecos in general. I do like to have rapashi on hand. It's a gel-based food that's relatively easy to make, but I have found, at least, especially with the plecos, that I get really good survival rates when I throw a little block. In fact, it's not a very well done video because I think it might be the second video I ever did. And I think Luke is in that video as well.
Aww.
Yeah, when he was like
little.
tiny. Like now he's like almost 6 feet tall. He's taller than me, and he's like, "Hey Dad, you're short." But in that video he came out to like less than my shoulder. But anyway, we did a bristlenose breeding video, like Karen breeding video. And in there, they're eating rapashi, the big chunks of rapashi. So you could kind of check that out. So that might help with the otos. They do eat algae, but a lot of the algae eaters, they have kind of like their favorites. And so I've noticed, for us, the algae, like the bristlenose plecos, they tend to do a really good job on the glass before the algae ever even has a chance to kind of set in. But yes, like they're not going to eat green hair algae or anything like that. So you could try that, see how that works. All right, let's see here. Multi-tank addiction, I think, left another
oh boy,
poo-poo emoji. Thank you, man.
Oh boy,
Yep.
That's his thing now. That's your thing.
That's his thing. He's probably like, every time he says something dumb, poo-poo is going to come out on the screen. Okay, Tesla Kill Dozer. Thank you so much. Super chat, appreciate it. Happy Wednesday night, Jason and Joanna. That would be you.
Happy Wednesday.
No breeding questions here. Just want to say I really enjoy your videos. Well, thank you. I really enjoy it, and I'm happy that you're part of this thing. And I will say, and I really mean this, I think that our community that we've built is probably one of the most, wouldn't you say it's probably like one of the nicer groups of people? Because I always see, there's a couple of things I notice. I see like on Facebook where people are just tearing each other apart.
Yeah.
And I almost never see that in our comments sections, which is really good, although I do keep an eye on it too. But I never see that. And then there are, and I'm not going to mention any names, but there are some YouTube channels where they're a little bit more edgy, and they're just, and every once in a while, like some people will come from that kind of atmosphere where they're just kind of more coarsely joking around and stuff, and maybe more freely speaking their mind using words that are maybe not the best for a family atmosphere. And I'm like, yeah, that's not quite what we're going for here, but still appreciate everybody being here. Denise, thank you for the super chat. I went to buy a used 125 gallon for an Oscar and was surprised to find the fish were surprised to find the fish were to go with it. Anything in this mix to be concerned about? Yeah. I'm like, where's the mix? Oh, thank you again for the super chat. Okay, so hold on. So we've got an Oscar and a 125. And we're thinking 4 angels, 2 gouramis, 2 silver dollars, 1 pink tetra, 3 albino cory cats, 3 dojo loaches, 2 bala sharks, 3 common plecos.
It's a party.
Yeah. So Oscars. Obviously they're big, and so anything that fits into their mouth when full grown, they're going to eat. Most likely, they'll get hungry and eventually eat those cory cats. But the problem is, cory cats have a really cool defense mechanism where they can stick out their fins and they're kind of pointy. and they wind up getting stuck in larger fish's mouths. Same with plecos in general. Well, you're talking about common ones, so it's not going to be as big of an issue. But so the cory cats with an Oscar probably wind up causing you significant problems later on when the Oscar gets full grown. Silver dollars are cool. Think that would be a good mix. The pink tetras are probably too small long term because they're kind of like the what are those, the glow tetras? Not the glow lights, but the glow tetras. So that's about a couple inches. So that bad boy would probably be gone at some point. Four angels, but if your Oscar is older and more relaxed, like some of them get, believe it or not, the four angels might work, but you never know. It depends on how active your Oscar is. Gourami's fine, but I would keep it at 1, and I would make sure it's a big one. So like maybe like the pearl gourami or the moonlight, something a little bit larger. They're pretty assertive. The dojo loaches might wind up being food. Ballast sharks, size-wise, are fine. Even activity is mostly okay. So here's the issue I've had with ballast sharks, and I had them in my 4-foot 150. And I always said, if I ever did ballast sharks again, I would want at least an 8-foot tank. And the reason for that is they do get large. So you're looking at a foot. And it's not so much that, okay, could one ballast shark easily fit in a 125 and be pretty okay? Yeah, I think so. Even 2, like you said, might be okay. But when you do ballast sharks, they really like to be in groups. And if I've seen videos, like the ones who really did this thing well, where they build out these massive, like 3, 4, 5,000 gallon tanks that are really long, not very high, and they'll have a fairly large school of ballast sharks in there, and it's like, wow, that was the way they were meant to be, and they're so cool. So for me, I would shy away from the ballast sharks. They fit in that tank, and they will get along, I think, for the most part, but just something to consider. 3 common plecos. So common plecos get really big, like 18 inches. And it's like you're going to have a pleco that could be from head to tail from the front of the tank to the back, because that tank's only 18.5 inches. And I think what a lot of people see is the common plecos one, yeah, you're right. It's going to be big enough so that the Oscar's not going to eat it. But a couple things happen with the common plecos. One, when they're young, they eat algae. As they get older, they don't. They become more scavenger-like, and they tend to eat a lot of food at the bottom of the tank. So for people who want that algae-eating sort of fish, all of a sudden, that's not really doing it for them. So that's something to keep in mind. 3 of them, I think even 1 is going to be a lot for that tank. So if I were looking for cleanup crew, and this, I can tell you what's worked for me, but I don't necessarily say that it's going to work for everybody. You look at our 125, I've got like 8 or 10 bristlenose plecos in that tank. Full grown. The males will get to around 6 inches, and my Oscars have always left them alone. So I'm not saying yours will, but the common pleco, I think a lot of people get them and they regret it because they live a really long time. They get really huge. They make a massive mess of your tank. They're going to knock everything over. So decorations, fake plants, they'll move rocks around. They do a lot of, you wouldn't think so, but they do a lot of stuff that is undesirable for fish keepers. So angels, maybe. Gourami, probably. If it were me, I would probably up that silver dollar from 2 to like 6 with the Oscar. And I think you're going to have a really cool looking fish tank. I do. So just my thoughts, and nothing in there is like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you're going to do that. But the cory cats and the tetra will get eaten, but the other ones, you just want to think about a little bit. Fin Wiggles, look what she sent. Piece of cake.
Aw, thank you.
A little birthday
cake.
Yep.
Yay.
Very cool. Thank you.
And I think I got some sparkles too. I got
you
some
got
glitter
sparkles.
And some sparkles.
Oh my gosh, this chat is
Mm-hmm.
going crazy over here. I was trying to scroll down and then just did a
come on now,
a whole giant thing. Hold on. All right, so
man.
I'm back. Multi-Take Addiction, thank you so much for the super chat. Happy birthday, Joanna. Mine is on Saturday. Hey, happy birthday for Saturday.
Oh, hey.
Yeah, Chris has got a birthday coming up on Saturday.
April birthdays.
Yep, so you guys could celebrate his birthday on his live stream. He does a live stream on Saturdays, so
Sweet.
check it out. David, thank you so much for the super chat. I was looking at the 75 on Petco too. Okay, it was just about the place in my living room, and it was about space. But my fish come first, so yes, thank you. Yeah, I don't doubt that for a second. Right, that's why you're here, fish nerding out with us. So, yeah, and I get it. It's like, I got the 7. Because the 55 is like, okay, it's 4 feet, but it's only 12.5 inches wide, so it's not quite as cumbersome. The next thing you know, you got a 75, and those 75s are definitely they're larger. But yeah, it's just something to think about, But cool. Faith, thank you so much for the super chat. I enjoy watching and learn a lot from you. Well, I appreciate you being here. Thank you. Glad you're here on a Wednesday night, nerding out about fish with us. Blue Jackson, thank you for the super chat. Happy birthday. Finally, I catch you guys live. New 55-gallon cichlids is what I'm going with. Any suggestions and what species are great for breeding? I like that question. Thank you again for the super chat. 55-gallon. You're going with cichlids and you want to breed. So a part of this, just like I mentioned, it's kind of about your water parameters. So I'll give you some suggestions if you've got softer water with a lower pH, or if you've got water that's a little bit harder with a higher pH. So the harder water with a higher pH, you're probably looking at, if you want cichlids, African cichlids. So a 55-gallon is a perfectly acceptable tank if you wanted to do maybe some less aggressive Mbuna. Like if you were to check out our 55-gallon that you rescaped, we have rusty cichlids mixed in with Pseudotropheus psilocybe, so they're not really huge. Yellow labs would also work in that particular environment. And so you get, eventually you work your way up to maybe 15 to 18 of those fish in a 55-gallon. They're mouth brooders. You just have to pull the females when you notice that they're holding. I've never had issues with Mbuna hybridizing. Could it happen? I suppose so, but I just haven't had that issue. So that could be a thing. 55-gallon, you could also do things like shell dwellers. And so you could have like a multi-cichlid on the bottom, put a bunch of shells down there, some lighter colored sand. That might look cool. The only issue there, I suppose, is that the shell dwellers are only really going to utilize the middle to bottom part of the tank. So the top half of the tank's going to look a little sparse. The issue is if you're really dead set on breeding, I wouldn't put anything else in there. But if you want to be like, I'm going to breed a little, but I also want something to look at, then you could combine your shell dwellers with Cyprichromis leptosoma, which we've done a species profile on both of those fish. Cyprichromis leptosoma is a really awesome mid to top water fish that would breed readily in a 55-gallon if you've got harder water. If you have softer water or even neutral, right? Neutral to slightly less. What do you think? Rams? Rams might be nice. So I think you could probably get away with a couple pairs. Eventually if you had a couple pairs of rams, maybe did like Bolivians on one side and German blues on the other. Now there's always a risk that it might not work out and that one pair decides to bully the other. But that's something you could try. A pistogramma would be a really nice fish for a 55-gallon. And with that, then you can also keep some fish towards the top. You just have to get some of those fry out of there so they don't get picked off. Crebensis are pretty cool. Another one that comes to mind, that there are some jewel cichlids out there that would be pretty nice in the 55. You just have to make sure if you do jewel cichlids like we did. I did a species profile on jewel cichlids, and the strain that I had this incredible deep red and like almost purple to them. And it was the best jewel cichlid strain I had ever seen. And like a moron, I got rid of them at a swap. I'm like, all right, I bred these things. And that was when I wanted to put the star sapphires in there and let them grow out. Mm-hmm. I really regret getting rid of those fish. So those, cribs, apistos, rams. If you're into something a little bit more challenging and you've got softer-ish water, Dichrosis, the checkerboard cichlid, is really cool. Nanacara is a small electric blue acara type of fish that's getting a little bit more yellow. That's cool. Electric blue acaras, regular acaras are cool. So hopefully that gives you some options, some things to think about.
Hey, can I shoot out a question while you just mentioned the electric blue acara?
Yeah.
Okay, this is from Ardwan. I read electric blue acara have lots of issues due to breeding. Trying not to blame myself because I can't find what I did wrong.
Electric blue acaras, So out of the electric blues, and I've mentioned this before, they tend to be the most stable of the, so like, compare those to like the electric blue Jack Dempsey's or the electric blue Rams. I find the electric blue Acar to be the most stable, but I also find for breeding purposes that they are a fish, at least for me, the first couple times they bred, the fry survived for a while, and then I am 90% certain that the parents decided to eat them. So if and when they start breeding in the 125 again, I'm just going to remove the fry. So I'm going to remove the fry, give them their live baby brine, and I think I'm going to have much better luck. So that's been my experience with them. Wade, thank you so much for the super chat. Appreciate it. Hello. Currently have a 45-gallon aquarium. That's a cool size. You know what? I like the 45. You don't see those as much in the stores anymore. I have 8 Neolamprologus similis. That's an awesome fish. Some in the tank have bred, and I got about 7 fry, but my fry are not growing. I currently feed baby brine, flake food throughout the week. Yeah. They don't grow fast. So I think probably one of the most important things when it comes to fry is let them just, as long as you've got the proper size tank and you do, a 45 is more than enough space. That tank, you could easily have 100 similis in there and they'd probably be fine, provided that you have enough shells. So Lake Tanganyika fish in general don't grow fast. And that's everywhere from the shell dwellers to the frontosa. We always joke in our fish clubs, when you see like a 4-inch frontosa, you're like, man, that's 4-inch frontosa is huge. How long you had it? 20 years, right? Because the Tanganyika fish they don't grow quite as fast. And I found that to be true with just about every single species that I bred, from the shell dwellers to the rock dwellers to the open water feather fins and Cyprichromis. So just have patience. You're doing the right thing. So if you've got live baby brine, with our shell dwellers, I feed it twice a day, once in the morning, once at night. You've only got 7, but the adults will eat it too, and they'll really love it. And you'll probably start seeing little babies pop. Once they get started, you'll start seeing more and more of them popping up. So you're on the right track. Just have patience with them, because Lake Tanganyika fish, they will test your patience sometimes. All right. Oh, man, this thing is really jumping around on me. Leslie's Aquatics, thank you so much for the super chat. Thank you both for taking the time to educate the fish fam. What tank mates would you recommend for a green terror cichlid? I like green terror cichlids. They are very pretty, and also they get their name for a reason, right? The green terror part. That depends on the size of the tank. So if I had a green terror and anything less than a 75, the answer would probably be just keep it by itself. Maybe a bristlenose pleco in there as a cleanup person. Just a little cleanup person, little dude, bristlenose pleco. Yeah, and he would, give him some rock work, and he can go hide in there while the lights are on and come out and clean up at night.
Yeah.
If you've got a larger tank, like a 75, if that green terror's been in there for a while and it's larger than 3 or 4 inches, it gets tricky, because I feel like anything I tell you, it might not work, right? So when you're looking at a green terror cichlid, it's like, okay, all the usual suspects. Like, I know the jewel cichlid, they come from a different continent. It's a West African, but I was just talking about them, so they're fresh in my brain. Maybe you're looking at firemouth cichlids, convicts, Jack Dempsey's. The Geophagus brasiliensis might be something to consider. The only issue with a lot of those fish I just mentioned is they've got that spangling just like the green terror cichlid does. And so sometimes they will go head to head. You'll see them locking lips. If it's a 125, all those fish I just mentioned are a little bit easier to deal with, all right, to keep them together. But if you're looking at non-cichlids, and believe it or not, sometimes that can actually be a less stressful thing. Again, if we're looking at least a 75, I'm not doing this in anything less than a 75. Then you're looking at maybe full-grown rainbow fish, rose-line sharks, possibly something like a red-tailed shark or a rainbow shark would be a nice addition, depending on the sizes, right? If they're relatively evenly sized, that could be a potential. Things like we mentioned before with the Oscar, the silver dollars, again, at least in a 75-gallon, are all things to consider. So hopefully that kind of gives you some ideas. The problem is with the cichlids, when you've got established South or Central American cichlids in a tank already, that can be a little bit more tricky. So just have a backup plan. I always stress, when you're mixing cichlids, make sure you've got a backup plan. The other thing that might work is like female Midas or red devil cichlids might work. I don't know the male would work so well, but the females might. George, appreciate the super chat and the message retracted, but I'm glad you're here. Thank you so much. All right, let's see here. Scaling on down. Fin Wiggles, thank you so much for all the support and for being here all the time and making this time a really awesome thing. Set up the 12 long. Oh, cool. So you got the 12 long set up with 8 Danio from Flips. Very cool. Densely planted. Any chance these fish won't eat their fry? Well, there's a chance they won't eat their fry. I think you reduce the likelihood if you said densely planted. That helps. That will help significantly. One of the things that I failed to mention when I was going through all the tips is one of the ways to reduce fry predation. And I can't believe when I was talking about food, I didn't mention this. Now here we are, an hour into this thing, and I'm giving you one of the most important tips of all for fry survival.
Wow.
So if you stayed, if you're watching the replay and you stayed till now, you're getting a special tip, Primetime Aquatics tip. One of the ways that I have maximized fry survival, and it may work in your case as well, is make sure the adults are really well fed. That's especially important, like for your at least killifish. I think that's one of the reasons why we got so many fry surviving in there, is they were getting constant supplies of live baby brine, even the adults. What a lot of people don't believe this, but in the 125 Oscar tank, we had peacock cichlids, OB peacocks, we had red empress in there, we had dragon bloods in there, and they were breeding like crazy in that tank. And I would pull some of the OBs out and sell those at swaps and auctions, and a lot of those fry were surviving. And that was when we had Timmy too, our 18.5-inch tilapia, and the fry weren't being eaten. And there were other peacocks in there. And the reason for that, I think one of the reasons is, one, there were some hiding spots, but two, we really made sure to feed the adults well. And so they had a nice full stomach. And I think that cuts down on a lot of predation. And that's especially true for things like guppies and endlers and mollies. Like our 50-gallon low boy that's got, the mollies in it. I started with that tank with maybe 5 or 6 black mollies. And at the peak, there were probably, 40 or 50 in there. And there was very little fry predation. And I think the reason for that is the adults were being fed so well. They didn't really want to mess with the babies. Like, all right, I'm not chasing that thing down. That silly looking animal over there is going to put food in the top of this water here in a second.
But the 50-gallon, I never told you, but I did do something so that they wouldn't eat their babies. I put up little signs everywhere. It says, "Don't eat the babies."
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, those mollies are pretty smart. Clearly, they could read.
Yeah, I thought it would help.
Yeah.
Here's one. Shy Savage Cichlids on science, and I think he even mentioned somewhere that he's gonna be popping the Tylenol because he's ready.
Ready for science?
Yeah.
All right. Science is fun. Science nerds, science fish nerdy people unite. All right, let's see here. Thank you so much, Tyler, for the super chat, man. Is it going to be a heavily planted? It is going to be a heavily planted sand tank. A lot of cleanup crew in this tank. Haven't set it up yet. Getting ideas. Any fish stock ideas? So hold on. Let me go back to the original, because is that the one we were talking about with the shrimp and stuff and the otos? Hold on. Nah, I can't go back that far.
Oh boy.
Tyler, you don't have to send another super chat, man. Just in the comments somewhere, and maybe Mary or Myrtle, if you guys see his comment about, is that the one with the shrimp? Because I can't go back that far in the chats, then I can give you fish stocking ideas. But just leave that in there and highlight it in orange, and I'll make sure I try to catch that one. Marty, thank you so much for being here. Thanks for keeping the fish hobby interesting. Really like the science videos. Well, thank you so much. I like doing them too. Like I said, the challenge is, of course, I've got to go through the research and make sure. And in some of those things that I present, I have a lot of secondary sources just to make sure I'm not pulling in something, especially if the research is 5 or 6 years old. I then need to go back in some of the research journals and make sure that nothing has changed to make sure that research is still valid. You don't necessarily always see those articles because sometimes those are things I can't share because they're not on a public website. And so because I'm got all the science things, like I'm part of the American Society of Microbiology, and I've got these different groups that I'm in, I can access journals, and even I can do that through school, but I can't necessarily share them. So the science videos are fun, but the point, I guess, is that it takes a little bit more work than busting out, hey, what do you think is the top 5 coolest thing in the world? You know what I mean? So, Denise, thank you so much for the super chat again. Thanks. Oh, wait, where did it go? Where did it go? I'm going to read it.
Easy there.
It went away. Thanks. I didn't add my Oscar to the fish that were free with the tank. That's good. But then that combo is everything you had in there is those particular fish are going to work out fine. So David says, happy birthday. Hope you enjoyed your day.
Thank you, David. Yes, I did. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Victoria Lee Creates says, happy birthday to you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Been checking out some of those aquascapes. Very cool. George, here we go. Thank you again for the super chat. Thoughts on Nicaragüensis cichlid? I just got 2. They're cool. First of all, I like them a lot. So the 2, do you think it's a pair, a male-female pair, or do we not know yet? Because if they're smaller, sometimes it's going to take a little while potentially to see if you've got a pair. So if you do, that might be a fish where it's like, okay, if you're interested in breeding them, maybe you keep those by themselves. If you are not interested in breeding, and they do, just be careful, because they're the type of fish that will absolutely take control of at least one side of even a larger tank. If you've got 2 males, that can also present some challenges, not necessarily, and it also depends on the size of the tank, but it just is something to keep an eye on. But they're really great fish, not hard to care for, I don't think. So they're pretty hardy. But that's a great fish. That's an awesome addition to a tank.
Hey, Triton said, hi, y'all. Just got home. Brought home a juvenile clown pleco.
Nice.
How fun is that?
Yeah, I like those a lot. The clown plecos
too.
are great fish. We still have some in a 10-gallon that we're in quarantine now for the last 3 months. We're just looking for a tank to put the rest of them in. Chase, thank you so much for the super chat. 40-gallon breeder with Similis. 1 male, 4 females. 2 months ago, 1 female had 30 fry. Fed live baby brine daily. The fry are a 1/2 inch, but no more fries since the first group. Is that normal? That is a great question. So 30 fry is a crazy amount of fish for shell dwellers to have at once. I wonder if that wasn't 1 female, that if it was actually 2 or 3, and then sometimes what happens is the fry all just kind of mixed together. So, because you said 1 male and 4 females, I bet you there's more than 1 female in there that is responsible for those fry. Fry are a 1/2 inch, but no more. Fry since first group. Is that normal? In 2 months? Yes, it can be. So one of the things that can happen, and this is another thing I was going to mention in the original little thing of breeding tips. One of the things that you have to consider is critical mass in a fish tank. You have not reached it here just yet. You're getting probably, you still got a ways to go on a 40 breeder, but I've noticed that for some of my fish, whether that's shell dwellers or bristlenose plecos or guppies, at some point a tank has too many fish, and that will actually reduce the likelihood that the fish continue to breed, or they'll breed, but there's so many fish in that tank that more of the fry get picked off, even if that's not traditionally something that the fish will do. So for instance, with my bristlenose plecos, what I have found, if I've got a pair, let's say in a 20-gallon, or I've got maybe a couple males and a female in a 20-gallon, and both those males are sitting on eggs, and then they release all those fry, and now I've got, let's say, 40 fry in that 20-gallon tank, most likely they're done for a while, because that tank has reached, there's a lot of fish in there. The Malthies, the Similis, the shell dwellers can do that to an extent when they begin to run out of shells. And so what I mean by that is not all the fish have shells. So like, let's say you've got a 40 breeder and you've got these, 35, 40 fish in there, but you only have, let's say, 15 or 20 shells. Well, that makes it a little bit harder for fish to find a home and to breed and to do all that stuff. But for 2 months, they're a 1/2 inch. I think you're doing okay. That's fairly normal. Again, these fish, they don't grow fast. That's one of the reasons why they're expensive, right? When you go to a store and you find Lake Tanganyika fish, at least around us, the Lake Tanganyika fish are more expensive than the other types of cichlids because, one, they don't ship well. And so that means sometimes you're getting a lot of loss in the shipping process when the fish stores order them. So often what they do is they rely on local breeders. And two, like if I were to go out right now and clear out most of my multi 50-gallon low boy tank and say, okay, I've got, I don't even know how many fish are in there, maybe 300. And I were to go in there and take out 260 of them and say, I'm going to sell all these fish and I'm going to keep a group of 20. It's going to be a long time before I have enough fish to go back to a swap or an auction and sell those again.
Your math is wrong. You should have had 40 left.
Whatever, you know what? It's late. My math doesn't need to be perfect. You get the point, right? Just so yeah, it is normal. You're doing well with them. Ricky, thank you so much for the super chat. And I just lost where it was. There it is. My forest of hornwort in my guppy tank is dying on me, and now it looks like I'm getting some white algae on the bottom. Should I clean it or leave it? I'd clean that up. Yeah, that hornwort is awesome, especially for guppies. The issue with hornwort is it grows really fast, and then all of a sudden something happens and it dies really fast. I think a couple things can cause hornwort to die quickly. A few things. Lack of nutrients, and so that's one of those things where sometimes liquid fertilizer is required. The other thing that can happen is if you do a water change and you've got a lot of really heavy flow going back into the tank, I think, believe it or not, that can stress out the hornwort, and sometimes it will start to die back because of that. If there's a rapid change in water temperature when doing water changes, I also don't think it does well with that either. So those are the things, but definitely get that out of there because that stuff will just rot. It's like if the hornwort is falling to the bottom, it's leaving all those leaves and everything. That white algae that you're seeing it's almost like cloudy, right? So it kind of goes down there and it's kind of like almost like a foggy cloud on that. That's a couple things. One, that's due to the hornwort that's dying, but that's also usually due to a lack of water flow in the tank. So that could be another contributing factor to that. Delta Charlie, awesome. Thank you for becoming a primetime partner.
Ooh.
We'll have a video out for you guys tomorrow. Victoria Lee Creates, thank you so much for the super chat. Breeding bumblebee gobies. That's cool. Any and all information appreciated. I have a few and would love to dabble this summer. I, unfortunately, have not bred bumblebee gobies that I can remember. I don't think. Let me think about that for a second. Because, is that true? Have we not bred them? I don't think we have. There's going to be a few things. Bumblebee gobies don't get very large. So, from what I recall, and again, this is not me with like vast amounts of experience, like, oh yeah, I just bred those last month. You're going to want some tight spaces for them, most likely either like mini caves or places where they can kind of squeeze into. I'm pretty sure they're going to eat their babies. I'm also fairly certain that the fry are going to be so small that you're going to want a really established tank to either, most likely what's going to work best is to remove the bumblebee goby parents after they hatch. And as long as that tank is well established, I am fairly certain that even live baby brine shrimp is going to be too small for the fry. And so you'll have to deal with maybe bringing in some some infusoria, or maybe let like Java moss grow in that tank, or maybe even some green hair algae to increase the likelihood that they have something to eat. But I'm just kind of going off memory there, so I don't have a lot of expert advice for you on that one. But appreciate the super chat. What you got?
I was looking for my name. I saw my name somewhere. Oh, here we go. From James Manning. Hi, James. Got a small scale question for you. Best filter for price for the scales that's small, like the punch bowls. Oh, for like the punch bowl ponds? The punch bowl pond. I like that. I would suggest I put shrimp in there so that I didn't need to have a little filter in there, but probably the Aquatop is one of the smallest ones that we use, and I really like it. Aquatop, right?
The sponge filter?
Yeah.
Yeah, those the Aquatop mini sponge filter. So it's got so like tiny sponge on the, and we did a review on that.
Yeah.
But I think when we did that review, it was on the best filters for a betta tank, and you'll see it there. And I think I may even have a link to it in that video. So best betta filters or something like that on our channel. I reviewed that one, and then the the other smaller hang on back. But anyway, it's there.
Yeah, because we were using them in the 2.5 gallons, which is very small, just like a punch
that's
bowl.
A good filter. You're right.
Punch bowl pond.
Yep. Chase said all the fry in the 40 breeder stimulus came from the same shell. That's cool. I mean, I cannot recall ever seeing any of my shell dwellers have that many fry at once. But awesome, man. But yeah, you're on the right track. Just be patient. It's all right, man. All right, let's see here.
Oh, here. Wait, Wesley has a question.
Sure.
Have a pregnant Oto in a 20-gallon densely planted community tank with guppies, guppy fry, and a male betta. Should I move it to my 10-gallon that only has 2 CPDs?
I think they've got a better chance of surviving in the CPD tank. I don't know if they will. I mean, baby Otos are really tiny, so even a full-grown CPD, it's possible that they could get, but I think you'll have a better chance of them surviving in there compared to the other tank that you had mentioned, for sure. Yep. All right, let's see here. Trying to scroll on through, looking at the questions. Delta Charlie at Primetime Aquatics says, trace ammonia cause cage to drop over time. Every time I test ammonia is 0, but my cage is going down. Maybe I need to up biofiltration. So I did, the last science video I did kind of address this, and the answer is yes, it can. It's not always drastic, but it's not so much a chemical reaction as it is the microbes that are responsible for the nitrification process, especially the ammonia oxidizers. What they do is, as they're converting the ammonia to nitrite, they are also consuming some of that carbonate hardness. So yes, it can do that, but and I don't remember, now I have to go back into my brain, like what was the conversion? I don't remember if it was something like 1 part per million ammonia for every 1 part per million. There was like multiple parts per million of KH that was basically consumed in that because the microbes were reducing it. So yeah, it can happen. Let's see here. Legend Fish Tanks, my Cautopunctatus had fry 2 times, and both times they've gone missing. They're the only fish in the tank. I use a sponge filter. I tested the water and feed the baby brine shrimp. So yeah, the Cautopunks for me, the first time they bred, I had a couple pairs in each 20 hide that I used. And every time that they bred the first time, they ate the fry. Now the second time they did okay, but the first time they were gone. So the option there is, as soon as you see the fry, get the parents out. And then, because the fry don't need the parents for anything. It's not like they're feeding them or, eating off their mucus secretions or anything. So if you see the fry again, and I know it's a pain, especially if you got rock work in there, but if you can get the parents out, if you really want the fry to survive, definitely worth a shot. So Jonathan, thank you so much for the super chat. I got 6 Maltese in October. Now have at least a generations, like 40. How do I move them without disturbing the shells? Tried a net, epic fail with suction work, seems dangerous. Okay, so I'm glad you asked that question, because I saw another question earlier in the super chat about ocellatus. And so here's the trick with shell dwellers. For those of you who breed shell dwellers and eventually you want to move them out of the tank or sell them off and they keep running into the shells, that can be really frustrating. So one of the things that can work is you get a 5-gallon bucket. You put tank water in that 5-gallon bucket. You put a cycled sponge filter in that 5-gallon bucket. You put some decently sized rocks in the bottom of that 5-gallon bucket and build it up. So build it up so that you've got water, let's say 3/4 of the way up. Your rocks are at least half the way up that bucket. And then what you're going to do is you're going to take some egg crate. You're going to set it on top of the rocks. Take the shells out of your tank, put them in the bucket. Often, what happens is the shell dwellers don't like to be that close to the surface. So they're going to leave the shell, be like, oh my gosh, the surface is right here. Oh, look, there's places to go down lower. And then they go down into the rocks. Remove the shells, remove the egg crate, very carefully remove the rocks. And hopefully what you'll find at the bottom of that bucket are some shell dwellers. That could be the ocellatus, Maltese, Simulus. So try that. See if it works. Hopefully that will help you. Yeah, sucking them up is pretty dangerous. I wouldn't necessarily do that. I think you're right. The other option is you just take the shells, chuck them in a grow out tote or put them in a tank and see how many you got. And if you're going to sell them, you can, I mean, a lot of people, they will, like at the swaps, you'll see that they have a bag. It's labeled 5 multis. The shells are still in there. And you kind of got to trust the dude. Be like, all right, I'm paying $20 for this bag. Are you sure they're in there? Oh, yeah, they're in there. And they usually are. So, Liz, thank you so much for the super chat. I have 20 tanks all over the house. That is awesome. That sounds like a great house. The heaters are all set at 78. Awesome. Room temperature is 74. But the tank temps can be anywhere from 74 to 82. What makes them so unstable? It depends on where they're located. Mm-hmm. It depends on, so for instance, I know for our fish room in the basement, the tanks that are closer to heat vents, they get warmer just because the heat's kind of blowing on them. If you've got tanks anywhere near windows and doors, that can cool them off a little bit. The larger tanks can sometimes be a little bit harder to regulate water temperature if you're trying to use multiple heaters, like one on each side. I always recommend if you've got larger tanks, take the 2 heaters and plug them into a thermostat that is self-contained, and let the thermostat turn those heaters on and off simultaneously. That can help rather than trying to set 2 individual heaters in the same tank at the same temperature. But that is a lot of fluctuation. That's a lot. That's way more than what a heater should be giving you. So normally what happens is if you set a heater to 78, it might not kick on until 77, but it almost, at least in my experience, the heaters that I've had almost always shut off before they would ever heat the water to even 80 degrees. So that's a massive fluctuation. So I would check, just looking at where your tanks are located is a big one. But if they're really fluctuating that much, especially because you said the room temperature is 74, so that almost tells me that maybe some of those heaters aren't even working. And then if the tanks are just falling down to room temperature, and then maybe they heat up if they're next to a heating vent or something, or by, in the summer by a window or something like that. Or the heaters, are they undersized for the tank, and so they just can't keep up, and then they just default down to 74, and then once, they catch up after a while. So that's another thing, because usually with the heaters, you want to try to have 3 to 5 watts per gallon. And if they're undersized, they can struggle a little bit at times. I've always found, you said that the heaters are set to 78. The ones that are actually where you have the temperature adjustment are usually better. And then, of course, I'm assuming that you're using an external thermostat just to see what the tanks are in terms of temperature. Because if you're using any heater and the heater is telling you what the temperature is, they don't necessarily do the best job of that. So I try to use an external, I said thermometer, on a tank to make the determination. I'm sure you did. What do you got?
All right, George Taper. Let's see. My first question was retracted for some odd reason. Yeah, I don't know. Okay, I had a question about blue acara fry. I have 60 split 40-20 in a 20 long and a 10. They seem like they're growing slow.
Blue acara in a 20 long. Yeah, they're going to slow down on you. And the reason for that is that tank size. So I don't know how big they are right now. Do we know how big?
No.
Okay, so they're fry at 10 gallons, 20 gallons. So generally speaking, what I do with any fish that's, let's say, that's going to max out at 4 to 6 inches, which is, your blue acara are going to max out about that, is once they get close to an inch, I got to get them out of that 10 gallon. It doesn't seem like it would make a big deal, but if you've got a group of 10, 20, 15 something fry that are going to eventually get to 6 inches in a 10 gallon, it stunts their growth sooner than you might think. Even the 20, if you think about the adult size where they want to be in a tank that's ideal, at least a 40 gallon breeder or above, or at least a 4-foot tank, when you put them in a 10 or a 20, they will start to slow down considerably. And so one of the ways to get around that potentially, if you don't want to spend the money on another tank, is you start breaking them up into like 30-gallon grow-out totes, just the plastic totes with the cycled sponge filter. Maybe you've got some cycled decorations in there as well that have been in established tanks. That might be helpful, but I think it might actually be the tank size in that particular case. Okay, Jonathan, thank you so much for the super chat. Dude, that was worth it. Love your channel. I meant 3 generations. Hey, man. Awesome. Appreciate you being here. Tease Fish Tanks. Big fan, but first time on the live stream. Well, thank you so much for the super chat. Glad you're here. That's awesome. Thanks for being here. All right, let's see here. Andre says, dang, YouTube didn't send a notification. A topic I was excited about too. Well, don't worry, because eventually the replay will happen. You know what's been weird? And I don't know if this has happened to any of you lately, but I will get notifications like days after a video comes out for some of the channels I watch. Like I'm all excited, right? So you get this notification like, oh cool, this channel that I really love to watch just put out a new video, and I'll look or I'll click on it and be like,
that's old.
This thing came out 4 days ago, and now you're sending me the notification?
It's like you're not even like a top ranking watcher. No. You're like,
yeah, it's like, yeah, well, once we get around to it, it's like, you want to watch this? I'm like, well, I already did when it came out because I'm like a YouTube, checker on my subscription page. So, yep. All right, let's see here.
I just saw one.
I did too. Fairlawn says, would it be safe to put a breeding pair of common angels in a 29-gallon? They are currently in my BP tank, but are trying to breed and beating up everyone. Yeah, 29 for a breeding pair is fine. A lot of people breed angels in a 29. If that's all that you got in there, that's a good setup because it's tall and they'll be able to do what they need to do. So for sure, definitely worth a try. Yeah.
Emma is getting her first pair of goldfish on Saturday. So excited. Oh.
That's awesome. We've been talking about that lately. I had goldfish for a while, and I even think I mentioned that in some video. But I miss those fish. They're really fun.
They were so pretty.
So that'll be something to look forward to. Triton, we were on Bentley's stream yesterday, and the YouTube gods gave us the old buffer fish treatment. What's that? Were you just buffering and you're just stuck? That happened to us on our first live stream. It was a nightmare. Like we looked like we were just like on a strobe thing, like the whole time.
Yeah.
I should probably delete that stream, but it's kind of sentimental because it was the first one we ever did. Let's see here. Samuel asks, how long does it take for Maltese to reach maturity? Seems like it takes forever compared to my mollies. Yeah, it does. Again, Lake Tanganyika fish, shell dwellers, have patience. So what I would say is if you got fish that were less than an inch, you're going to have to wait a little bit because those fish are going to want to be at least an inch and a quarter before they start to breed, at least the males. Females are going to be pretty close to an inch. But once they start, it's just, they don't stop after that. So it's definitely worth the wait. All right, let's see here. K-Stu, 200 likes and Jason will smash the dresser and put 180 behind them. Don't tempt me with stuff like that.
I don't know if I wouldn't necessarily stop you.
Yeah, that's the problem. The problem in our relationship is usually there's somebody there who's kind of like a moderating force. And that almost never happens with us. It's like, hey, I was like, what was it yesterday on your birthday? You were on her birthday. She's cleaning out the garage. That was one thing she wanted to do on her birthday. That was.
It's good times.
But anyway, I'm like, wow, we got a big section of this cleared out, and I looked at it, I'm like, we could put like a 3,000-gallon tank in this part of the garage and just go crazy. And it wasn't like you immediately said no. You stopped for a second. You're like, no, I really want to have a clear space. But there was a pause.
I thought
pond. So that's
adding land to that kind of.
This is not probably the best combination here when it comes to doing stuff like that because it just winds up being, wow, they actually did that. There is a 3,000-gallon thing down in their garage now. Now I got to spend thousands trying to keep it heated. So
yeah.
And then I'll think about everything afterwards. Like, okay, well, I've got this 3,000-gallon tank in the garage. How am I going to actually do water changes on this thing? Well, I got the sink, and I'll just run the wastewater out into the grass. It'll be good for it. Middle of winter, I've created like a big ice pond in the front yard.
And
good.
And the funny thing is that we have a very small house.
Oh yeah.
So if we had a normal to a large size house,
it'd be game over.
Oh my
If we had a large yard,
Oh.
It wouldn't be a fish room. It would be the fish area, the fish. It would be fish mansion.
It would be fish farm.
Yeah. We'd have like, oh, this is a nice, cozy little 2-bedroom bungalow. And what's that in the backyard? Well, we had an acre back there, so I put in a 4,000 square foot multi-level fish room, complete with, you know, like those public aquariums that have like the 20,000 gallon aquariums. Like, oh yeah, I did that, but I just put a bunch of small tetras in there. No sharks? Nope. Just a bunch of small tetras. Finn Wiggles, thank you so much for the #1 fan sticker guy, the jumping guy. Thank you. Dan says, hey Jason, I love your channel. Have you ever bred tiger barbs? If so, how would you go about it? Thanks from Australia. Well, that's cool. Thank you for being here. What time is it in Australia? Are you guys behind us or in front of us or what?
Well,
I guess they'd have to be in front, right? Is it really late by you?
You know what? I have, it's about 3 a.m. in the cities that I do watch. But you know what? Australia, I always watch like London and stuff.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
You're part of the Commonwealth,
well, thank you for being here. Tiger barbs, I have not bred them on purpose. I once had tiger barbs breed, and I had a couple of fries survive, but I wasn't trying. They're egg scatterers, so my guess would be if I were going to try to purposely breed tiger barbs, I'd probably put spawning moths in the tank, feed them their bloodworms, feed them the live baby brine, because they would like to eat that too. Get a big group of them, let them scatter the eggs, pull the moths out, throw them in a tank with an air stone, wait a couple days, let them hatch, and then I'd have to feed something really small like the infusoria or microworms or something like that. So that would be my guess, but I have absolutely not an expert on that. Let's see here. James Manning, Jason Electric, yellow cichlids, third round of babies. I've overstocked the tank more than I probably should, but she still won't stop breeding ideas. Yeah. Are you pulling the female out? Because a lot of times what I found with Mbuna cichlids in a community cichlid tank, even if it's the same species, if you don't pull the females, they'll spit out the fry. The other fish eat them. I think in our 75-gallon Mbuna tank, and I don't know what it is, but red zebra fry, every once in a while I'll see one that was like, yep, I was born. I saw hundreds, or not hundreds, but dozens of my brothers and sisters get eaten right away. So I crawled into this rock, and I've been living here for 2 months. And then they get just big enough where they're like, I don't think anybody's going to eat me anymore. So they'll dart out and start eating food. But if I don't pull the females out of the Mbuna tanks, the fry never survives. So if they're surviving, that's pretty cool. But then it's like, how do you stop it? Then you got to remove either the males or the females, because the females will just wear themselves out.
Do you know what time it is in Australia?
I don't know.
It's about noon.
Noon
15 hours ahead.
Noon in the daytime?
Yep.
That's pretty cool. It's
noon in the daytime?
Yeah, noon in the daytime.
Oh boy.
That's awesome. I want to go there someday.
Mm-hmm.
That would be cool.
Wait, Whips World has a question.
Okay.
My sister just moved into a 4-unit condo. She had a 110 at her previous place, but got rid of it because she didn't think the floor at the new place would support it. What says you?
I am not a engineer or an architect or anything like that. I have no idea, because it depends on the condition of the floor. And I know construction people are like, oh, this is perfectly fine, or yeah, you got to watch out. I've always said if you're going to keep a tank that's a little bit heavier on a non-solid floor, you want to make sure the tank is running perpendicular to the joists that are holding a floor up, so that you can spread out that weight. And ideally, you'd want to be putting that tank against an outer wall, so it's not like in the middle of the room. It's like, well, yeah, I put it against the wall, but the wall was in the middle of the room, and then the floor starts to sag. But I have no idea if that will hold, because, I mean, if it's cement, I guess it doesn't matter. But if it's up on like a second floor, like I know some people who have these, live in condos or apartments, but their floor is cement. Yeah. So it's like, yeah, you put whatever you want up there at that point. Mm-hmm. I mean, within reason, not like 3,000 gallons, but it sounds like you're going to get another 110, man. Just enjoy it. Like, you just be like, you know what? I don't think it's going to work. I will hold the tank until you move out of the condo someday. I think that's a fair thing to do, a nice thing to do. Mary Page says, me too, Jason and Joanna. I would love to go to Australia. I've met so many great people like Colin Barsby and other people, Blake's Aquatics, and so many others. Yeah, so interesting side story that has nothing to do with fish. I had a student, a semester before the shutdown, who was friends. They met like doing like pen pal stuff, and her friend was from Australia. I don't even know how to do that, but she actually came to my class for like 3 weeks because she was in America, and it was really cool just kind of hearing
that's fun.
How things were down under. Mm-hmm. So definitely want to go. Oh, wait, when Maxie shaved the beard, dude.
That'd be weird.
So if you go back to the early videos, you will see my more shaven self. So I have not seen my chin. Like just this part, because I used to have just like, what do you call this thing, the goatee or whatever. So in my early videos, I had just this part right here. But even that, I have not seen my chin in 25, actually long, probably close to 27 years.
Yeah, I've never seen it.
I don't know what it looks like. It could be.
Laugh.
I could have the weirdest chin of any human being that's ever walked the face of the earth. Like literally, it could be completely crooked, and like I could have one of those John Travolta chins where like one half of it's like hanging down like an inch longer than the other half, and I don't even know. I mean, I don't think it is. It feels normal, but no. Yeah, I think I'd have a really tiny head too.
Yeah, you
Like
would, especially if you didn't have any hair up here.
Yeah, if this is all gone,
you'd be like.
people would be like,
so
"Hey,
tiny.
cue ball, how you doing?
You'd be
Stop calling me that." Yeah.
You're right. I got two.
Okay,
Sorry.
no, please.
Bogo. Okay. The Harry Woodsman. Come to Texas. Get some land. Build a house. That would be fun.
Yeah,
and
that would be pretty cool.
I could have a magnificent garden.
Not if we move to West Texas, then you're gonna have sand. Isn't it mostly sand in West Texas?
I don't know. Then I wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
Okay. Cheryl, California. Happy birthday. Mine was yesterday on the 13th
cool.
too.
Happy birthday.
13th,
That's
buddy.
awesome. That's cool.
Happy birthday.
Nice. Oh, here, I got a question I want to answer. PFC Magic. I'm trying to breed Julidochromis mallory. I've got 6. Some are getting cornered or kept near the top. Does this aggression mean good news? It appears some are entering hidden areas together. Yeah, that generally means that if nothing else right now, it means that you've got some fish in there that are getting territorial, and usually that happens mostly because you've got fish that want to breed. You may have to consider, I don't know how much rock work is in that tank. You need a lot, because what will sometimes happen with the rock dwellers, I have found that they are prone to eating each other's fry. Not all the time. I've got friends who've bred, like I've got Julidochromis transcriptus, and the person who bred those, in fact, I did a video of his richest fish room. He bred those things like crazy in a 20 long. But like for me, they don't survive because I've got Lelupai in there and some other fish, the Signatus, that eat the fry. But if they're getting, you're probably going to have to remove those fish that are in the corner, because that's never going to stop. So once those pairs start to form and the dominant males want to breed, they're not letting those fish out of there. So at that point, it's like, okay, let me get them out of there, because they're not going to breed for you at that point. Push into a corner, and they're probably not going to be living their best life, Right. So something to think about.
Amazing Larry.
I like that. Amazing Larry.
How do I convince the wife that fish aren't boring and we should get good-sized tank?
You can answer that one.
Well, I would say, is she a gardener? If she is, start there. Start with the plants. Aquascaping. Suck her in that way. Otherwise, magical world of Pinterest. So many different pictures out there of really cool inspos. Because if that's where I would start. Because if she thinks fish are boring, well, we always fall back on the male betta. It's kind of it hooks you into the hobby, and then you're a goner. So you could certainly try that. Otherwise, you just have to see what she likes. Like, have her drag her to a fish store and just see the ones that she kind of likes, and just don't push it on her.
That's right. And make it all about the decoration of the tank. Now we've got a beard debate going on here. The beard looks amazing. I was just trying not to comment on it. Well, thank you. Victoria Lee's like, team don't shave the beard. She's more like, team, I don't really need to see what your tiny little head would look like relative to the rest of your body, because I'm sure it would look crazy. You're probably right. All right, let's see here.
Wait, Casey wants to know, how about you shave it at 1 million subscribers?
No. Even then,
that's so
I don't,
far off.
It's like by that point, maybe that might happen. It'd be like, probably like 10 years from now or 15 years from now if I'm lucky, and then be like, I don't really even care. What's a beard? That thing on your face, okay. I'll be like all patchy. I'll have like male pattern baldness of the beard, and be like, well, you've only got 3 patches left on your face anyway. You might as well just get rid of it. That may happen. All right, let's see here. We'll answer a few more. Holy cow! We'll answer a few more questions, and then we'll think about wrapping it up. I've been having such a fun time with everybody here, talking fish breeding. Jason, I like your name. I love your multifasciatus Shelly colony. I wondered what, if anything, you do to alter the water parameters to suit them. So that goes back to what I was talking about earlier when we were talking about the breeding tips. I don't do anything because I happen to have a pH of 8.2 and water hardness, both general and KH, that's around 10 degrees, which is 10 to 12 degrees, which is pushing pretty close to 200 parts per million on both the KH and the GH. So that all works out great. And I think that's one of the reasons why I get such good breeding besides the feeding stuff is I don't have to chase the water parameters. If I was closer to neutral, what would I do? I'd probably use a lot of the carob sea cichlid mix or the aragonite as my substrate, and then I would try to bring my pH up and my water hardness up in that way. So that's probably what I do. Like those substrates don't do anything for us because our water is already meeting the pH that substrate would normally buffer to. So, yeah.
All right, everybody say hi to Kevin.
Hi, Kevin.
Hi, Kevin, because you took an awful lot of time to say hello to everybody
All
individually.
Right.
That took a long time, so hello.
That's pretty cool. That's awesome. All right, let's see here. Amanda says, not fish, but baby assassin snails are the cutest. They actually really are because, assassin snails, I've got this really intimidating name, right? And then you look at them like, these are actually really pretty. They've got the yellow and the brown patterns. They're kind of like a smaller version, well, I guess a little bit scarier, more jagged version of a nerite snail. But I like them. I like them a lot. Cool. I don't even know. Somebody gave us some assassin snails at one point in one of our fish clubs, and I chucked them in the Cyprichromis tank. And of course, they took care of all the regular snails that were in there. And then I just kind of spread them around to some of the tanks. Like for instance, some of the bristlenose pleco tanks, because I feed them so heavily, that has a higher likelihood of getting some snails. And so what I do is I throw the assassin snails in there to kind of keep that in check. Let's see here. All right. Max E, what is the best way to cycle a tank super fast? Also, sup, Kevin. Sup. Super fast, 2 ways. We actually did a video about it. Way number 1 is using filter media from a healthy established tank. So I would generally just take that out and put it in a new tank. And for the most part, as long as you're stocking the new tank very, very lightly, that's usually enough. And so if you know you're going to be setting up a tank and you could do some pre-planning for like 4 to 6 weeks, put some media in the established tank, let that do its thing and get all gunky and everything, and then take that out, whether that's biomedia or filter floss or especially sponge, and then just put that right in the new filter when you're ready to set the tank in 4 to 6 weeks. That way you'll know it's really seeded with a lot of bacteria. The second thing is we have a channel sponsor, Fritz Aquatics. They sell 2 products that I've tested multiple times, that we've tested multiple times, and it's worked every single time, and that is the Fritz Zyme 7 and the Fritz Turbo Start. Turbo Start is more if you've already got an ammonia problem. The Fritz Zyme 7 is live, and that's key, live beneficial bacteria that will allow you to get that tank started, but stock it very lightly at the beginning, and both of those things will work, usually work very well. And Merle mentioned the live plants. Live plants are also really, really good because live aquatic plants actually would probably prefer to have the ammonia and nitrite as a nitrogen source. The issue is in a well-established tank, the microbes are competing with them for that ammonia and nitrite, so they can still use the nitrate relatively well, and so they default there. But yeah, live plants, fast-growing too, like things like hornwort, guppy grass, what else? Fast.
Duckweed.
Yeah, well, seriously, yeah, duckweed, absolutely. Yeah. All right, one more. All right, Rick says, would be nice for intros to your mods on one of the live streams. So what I want to do is at some point, it'd be really, once we get your studio set up, have better lighting, better audio, and a new live streaming system, it would be cool to get them more involved. Like Mary Page, if you want to know more about Mary Page, she does a lot of stuff on Saturdays with the multi-tank addiction. So sometimes she's on there.
And sweet videos on her own channel because like when you take us walking around your little creeks and stuff like that, that's cool. Woo, love it.
Very cool stuff. All right, everybody, I think we are going to call it a night because it's getting late. This might be like one of our longest live streams ever, but I really appreciate you being here. It was a lot of fun, a lot of good questions. Thank you so much for everybody who left us super chats and all the kindness that you've shown us. Mary Page, Middle, thank you so much for everything you do. And channel members, we'll see you tomorrow, and we'll do some kind of a walk around the fish room and talk about some stuff. But we will be back next Wednesday at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time, and we will see you then. But appreciate you being here. Thank you. Hope you have a great week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.